And if you're in the Cardano community, make sure to share this video so the idea of decentralization and Cardano gets out to the masses. All right, guys, enjoy.
Charles, thanks for joining me today here.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get started. We just had the Vassal hard fork, obviously, and everything went off without a hitch. Went very well. Right on the back of the Ethereum merge. You guys kind of stole some of the news from that, which I know you like. What are the implications of the Vassal hard fork? Like, what can we see going forward on the network that'll be indicative of what just happened?
So Vassal was a natural continuation of what was started with Alonzo. So Alonzo was a very conservative hard fork, and it brought the extended UTXO model and Plutus to Cardano, but it didn't bring a lot of extended functionality like reference inputs or these types of things. And what we wanted was that the DeFi community could work with us and others, and we could kind of come up with some SIPs that would expand the language in the direction that they needed for them to be able to build dApps. It's a product of about a year worth of effort and in the standards process, SIP 31, 32, SIP 33, SIP 40. And effectively what these have done have created new capabilities in Cardano scripting language that have already been reflected in a lot of dApp developers seeing substantial improvements in the reduction of transaction size as well as the reduction of cost. It also brought pipelining. And what pipelining basically did is made Cardano better, faster, and cheaper. So these two things together were a very significant upgrade, and what's going to happen is a huge wave of people building on Cardano are going to be able to take advantage of that and ultimately have an easier time writing dApps and applications. So if you zoom out, it's not a big deal. It's just an iterative, natural improvement to things, but very locally, it's the threshold upon which a lot of projects were waiting to launch. And so it's very exciting from an ecosystem viewpoint.
Right, and this hard fork had more community input than the other ones, correct?
Tremendously so. In fact, it was the community that needed and demanded these capabilities and features, and it's just an example of an iterative instead of a revolutionary roadmap. So things like Ouroboros or extended UTXO are completely new innovations, and what ends up happening after you introduce them is that there's a collection of things you guessed right on, some you didn't guess so right, and some unfinished business. And the point of things like Vassal is to basically clean those things up and make it better for everybody. And then if you know you've done it right, if you look 3, 6, 9 months later and you have a lot more chain traffic, a lot more dApps, and ultimately a happier community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, when we're thinking about, the community building on top of this, putting on, many of these community proposals and things like that, it makes sense that this would be the one that had the most because it's the bear market, right? So, I know Big Pay was talking to me behind stage and he said, man, it's so crazy how many people here are talking about they're building something or they're working on something or they've made it into crypto in some unique ways. And I'm like, yeah, that's a bear market where all the people that are here are working on stuff. I mean, could you imagine if we had done this event, maybe 18 months ago, there would be so many more people here, but those people come and go. It's these times when we're in the bear market, which is where people really come in and they stick, and that's great to see from the community. So I think that communities, they generally are looking for the next big thing, right, with your network. So we have the Vassal hard fork to look forward to. That's over. That's done. What is kind of the next stage of the roadmap that will possibly get people excited?
Well, two eras have started concurrently, the Basho era and the age of Voltaire. So in November, there's going to be a very aggressive outlining of what Voltaire needs from our view, and then obviously the community fills in all the details. Now, Basho is just about better, faster, cheaper, so that true scale. And there's a lot of different ways to cut that up. Input endorsers is one, Mithril is another, Hydra is another, sidechains is another, and just continued improvements in things like diffusion pipelining and iterative improvements in the software. So both of them are being built concurrently, which is expensive and time-consuming, but there's good people on both sides. And then there's also a lot of cleanup, partial delegation, something I've asked for years and years and years, and it shows you I'm not king of the world because we still don't have it. But hopefully that'll come in place sooner rather than later. And then other things about improving the level of decentralization with stake pools, and so some parameter changes, some fundamental changes to that model, and then also technology like Conclave I think will help tremendously. So there's no silver bullet to any of these things. It's just good old-fashioned hard work. And obviously Plutus continues to evolve as a language. Good programming language takes about 3 years to 7 years, somewhere in that range, to kind of mature and get to a point where it's useful. So Plutus is about 1.5 years into that cycle. So there'll be a version 3, a version 4, and new capabilities, new features will come. And then as people build dApps, they're obviously going to say, hey, this stuff is really hard. Can we have more stuff to solve that? And this other stuff we'd like. Certification is a big one as well. So certification's where you write a specification, then you write the code, and then you create some evidence that your specification was followed. What that does is it helps you get rid of a lot of bugs and security problems and gives you strong evidence that the protocol is what's called semantically correct. It's very important in an age of hacks that we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come back to the ecosystem in a little bit. Some of the projects that are being built on Cardano, the Cardano NFTs. How many guys own Cardano NFTs? Okay, there's some people. Okay, there's some people. I like it. But I want to touch on something before we get there, which is price. I know you don't talk about price, but I want to talk about price really in regards to crypto as a whole, right? Because I'm sure that almost every single person in here who came in this room, the idea of the price and making money with different projects, like at some point it's came to your mind. If it wasn't 100% why you came in, obviously in a bull market that number is much higher. But when you look at the hard fork that just occurred, traditionally we had seen price of Cardano go up a little bit around, sometimes massively around those forks. The question is, we didn't this time, right? Obviously. The question is, what connection do you see, not with Cardano, but what connection do you see with price speculation and use case and users on a network? Do you think we're at a point where we're going to see that have some correlation? Because we haven't really seen that so far.
Well, it's kind of silly to think that cryptocurrencies are divorced from the macroeconomic reality of the world. The stock market's down $9 trillion. Russia is deploying nuclear weapons to their western border. There's crazy stuff going on in supply chains around the world. There's all kinds of geopolitical issues. U.S. economy is not as strong as it used to be. It's a tough time. It's a recession, and we're still dealing with the hangover of COVID.
Well, I think Joe Biden said it wasn't a recession.
Well, they could change the definitions of things, but sometimes things are what they are, no matter what you want to call them. So this non-recession recession is pretty devastating for a lot of people, and we're still dealing with the consequences. We just lived through the largest wealth transfer in American history between the small businesses and poor to the wealthy, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. So crypto, I thought, would be counter-cyclic and would be a safe harbor for people to store wealth in. Unfortunately, people tended to treat crypto like a risk asset to shell off when macroeconomic conditions deteriorate. Part of that was because of the institutional participation, and part of that was also that we had a bull market which was blatantly irrational. Everything had a $10 billion valuation. You got pictures of bananas as NFTs selling for $1 million. It's not realistic or feasible. So all things considered, we're in a good place as an industry relative to what we've accomplished and how many people are there. I think 2021 was just a bit irrational in where it was at. And what'll happen is, just like I've been through 7 of these cycles since I entered the space. It's build a bear. It's a bear market, so you build in it, and then a few years later, you get back to a bull market. So I don't tend to worry about the cycles. I do tend to worry about the U.S. dollar. We're at over $30 trillion in debt. Unfunded liabilities are over $100 trillion now. We spend more on interest at this point than we spend on our military. This is a bad deal, and America can't sustain itself. Social Security is forced, because it's indexed to inflation, to raise 8.5%, and it's already unfunded for a big chunk of it. Health spending still is extremely high, and this particular government seems to be incredibly hostile to a lot of the industries that tend to create a lot of jobs and value for the United States. And they have this fantasy that all these new businesses will just magically materialize to replace it, when they've made it in many ways a very uncomfortable environment to start new businesses. Just look at the cryptocurrency industry and how we've been treated by some of the regulators. It's like, okay, well, you're welcome for the multi-trillion-dollar business. I guess we could take it to Singapore or something. So it's pretty sad in that respect, and that's the only way you get out of it. And if you have that mindset, you wake up and you can't tax your way out of it, and you can't grow your way out of it, so you just accept the default and the decline. So I don't really think crypto is the problem and the price being down. If there's anything we've done as an industry from a technology viewpoint, an adoption viewpoint, a use and utility viewpoint, we're better today for most ecosystems than we were in 2021 or 2017 during the last two bull runs. But the issue is that the macroeconomic environment that we find ourselves in is incredibly fragile and unhealthy, and it's getting worse every day.
If you're in my community and you watch my videos, we talk about the 4-year cycles. I call myself a 4-year cycle fundamentalist because so far, all the price action that we've seen throughout the history of Bitcoin, it does coincide with the 4-year halving cycle. That being said, one day that could certainly change. I think people are looking macroeconomically too hard at correlation. They're trying to say, oh, Bitcoin's going down. Oh, look, the stock market's going down too, so they're obviously correlated. Well, now, Bitcoin's held pretty well, and now people are looking and saying, oh, now it's correlated to gold. It's like, no, crypto's its own thing. And I particularly don't like the word cryptocurrency. I hate the word cryptocurrency. I say crypto assets on my channel because I think the word currency, from talking to a lot of beginners, it confuses them. They're trying to say, like, okay, how am I going to use Cardano or how am I going to use ADA as a currency? How am I going to use Ethereum as a currency? I mean, gas fees and stuff like that, obviously. What are your thoughts on, the word currency versus crypto assets?
So Don Tapscott wrote a book, I think it was Digital Asset Revolution or something like that, and he actually created a taxonomy, and he identified 9 different types of things a cryptocurrency could be as a digital asset. It's interesting asset when you have something that can wake up one day and be a commodity, wake up next day and be a currency, wake up the next day and be like a baseball card, and then be a security. And so it's a crazy world to live in if you want clear definitions of things, especially if you do regulation by buckets and you say, well, we regulate it one way if it's in this bucket, another way if it's that bucket, because it pops in different buckets all the time. So I like the term chimeric asset or financial stem cell or these types of things, and then people start thinking, okay, this is something that we use to represent either value or a relationship or an obligation or some form of representation of a thing. And when you start thinking it that way, you start realizing that basically it permeates to every part of society, whether it be video games or medicine or supply chains. And so it's really an extension of globalization in that sense. It's the value layer of the internet, and it's what allows us to start reasoning around how do we represent the events of the world, and how do we get those events to be understandable, contractual, and ultimately embed within them some rights that people can't violate in that respect. So I think that we're starting to realize that as an industry, and we're starting to see that because it's very clear the difference between an NFT versus a security token versus a DAO token versus Bitcoin versus ADA versus Ethereum. And I understand that some agencies just think they're all securities. Okay. Some people think the Earth, it was created 6,000 years ago. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but the vast majority of people, they tend to have a more nuanced view, and they tend to realize that how you use something, how you build something, is probably more meaningful to the conversation than a particular blind category, especially if you don't have rules for how to move things between buckets. The problem with the regime we have in the U.S. is if something becomes a security, it's not clear how it ever not becomes a security. You see, so it could become like Bitcoin tomorrow, but yet it'd still be regulated that way, and it would be bizarre. So this is an artifact of laws that were written by people that are dead today, that died in the 1950s. So not even recently. And obviously they need to be updated and modernized in order to accommodate the realities that we have today.
Yeah, well, but that would provide clarity, and the SEC couldn't sue everybody. So obviously, they don't want that. We're going to come back to the regulation for sure. I definitely want to get your thoughts on that. Thoughts on the Ripple case and all the drama on Twitter recently. But I want to continue talking about the ecosystem itself. Now, you've said before that when you look at the development pool, the number of Ethereum developers obviously is like number one. It's got a huge amount of people, but obviously it had first mover advantage and things like that. Plutus is your play to be able to get more developers onto the Cardano network. And that's, of course, how you're going to build more dApps and more DEXs and things like that. So I just want you to talk about for a minute, like, the importance of the Plutus language, what makes it so viable for people to develop on.
You know, it's kind of funny. People say, God, how do you compete with that Leviathan that is Ethereum and their first mover advantage? And I say, well, you know, there's only about 80,000 Solidity developers who are mostly JavaScript developers, and there's 25 million developers across the entire world. So they're kind of a drop in the ocean compared to the totality of all people who write software. The reality is that smart contracts are not general purpose things. They're meant for specific domains, and anytime we have a specific domain, you're going to end up learning a new language for that. If you do database programming, you learn SQL. If you do web programming, you learn HTML and CSS. If you're a JavaScript developer, there are frameworks that you learn, like Angular, and you learn how to become a Dart developer, and you learn about Polymer, and I guess it's Flutter now is their framework that they have. And they change over time, and they have their own languages embedded within them. The point of functional programming is that it solves a lot of the problems that you, the developer, working with these systems are going to have to face in terms of concurrency and parallelism, off-chain actions, and security. And lo and behold, where's our biggest problem? Throughput and scalability and hacks. So it's as if maybe, just maybe, the languages that Ethereum's using and other people are using in the imperative space are not well suited for the problem domains that we're
Well, you can just roll back the transactions, right?
Oh, sure, but even if you have that mindset, almost always people are going to lose money and trust at the end of the rainbow. $35 billion in hacks and counting, more on the way. But there's this worship of developer accessibility, and there's this worship of first to market, fastest to market, not understanding that this infrastructure is being built for years. It's almost like a train company wakes up and says, you know, we're competing with all these other train companies, so we got to get our train out before anybody else. Sir, what about the braking software? We don't have time to think about that. We just got to get the train on the tracks. What happens when the train crashes and all the people die? Oh, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Or not cross that bridge.
Yeah,
maybe how they die.
exactly. You know, and so we said, look, let's get it right, get the right accounting model, plan for on-chain, off-chain, plan for verification, and then, you know, you can always add more languages later on. You can add TypeScript, you can add JavaScript, you can add side chains that have these capabilities. One of the members of the ecosystem did that. DC Smart created an Ethereum sidechain, and suddenly we have Milkamada. More than one people in our ecosystem built stuff on top of it. They built bridges on top. I know those bridges exist because I lost money when they got hacked.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ethereum. Nomad was great. Lost a lot of money on that. So people build these types of things, and that's the point of a good ecosystem, is it should maximize your freedom. But the people who work at core, they have to have social responsibility, realizing what they build, millions, if not billions of people will use, and if they fuck up, those people get hurt. At the very least, they lose money. Almost certainly, they lose trust, and in some cases, they actually die. You know, imagine being an engineer at Boeing and working on the 737 MAX, and it crashes, and you find out it's a software problem. How can you live with yourself? You spend the rest of your life knowing that because you didn't do your job, people died. And if you're talking about a privacy coin, you talk about all these things, it's devastating to people when these things get unraveled and damaged. But yet, if the only concern is first to market, fastest to market, all that money these people made evaporated in 2022. It's all gone now. A lot of these ecosystems are gone. I was asked in Cointelegraph in an interview, they said, how fast do you think you need to move? I said, would you like us to move at the speed of Luna? I mean, $40 billion just disappeared overnight.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure we'll hear all about, you know, Do Kwon's reasons for that in his latest interview with Laura Shin. She'll write a great book about him. You know, so you know, I don't even think about it. It's not even my world. We have a job to do, and we said, how do we make it safe? How do we plan for concurrency and parallelism? What are the great ideas of computer science in the world of distributed systems and programming languages that we can borrow from? Haskell came from a group of some of the smartest people in the world, 1985. They came together and they designed something, and there's 30 plus years of legacy and great ideas there that we now all get for free because we chose that approach. UTXO came from Satoshi. Native assets on Cardano came from color coins. Okay, there were so many great ideas over the last 13 years, and in the distributed systems world, the last 40 years, that we are all recipients of. We didn't have to pay for, we just had the intellectual honesty to cite them and build on top of their shoulders. You can, of course, go replicate JavaScript if you want and live all the nightmares that ecosystem's lived for 20 years. Of course, you can go and try to build a giant Rube Goldberg virtual machine in the sky, as Ethereum has tried to do with the EVM. And again, you're going to run into tons of problems, and you're going to spend the next 10 years trying to undo all the mistakes that you did. And lo and behold...
Haven't they already done that once?
Yeah, they've done it multiple times. And lo and behold, while they're trying to undo those mistakes, you know what happens? You slow down. Yeah. They spent 7 years trying to deliver proof of stake to the market, and at the end of the rainbow, what did they give? The Hotel California of the cryptocurrency industry. You can check in, but you can't check out. You can't unlock your Ether. It's custodial and it's illiquid. Meanwhile, we from 2020 on, people in this room are running the model. And yet they have the audacity to say we don't exist. They don't even know any of our economics research.
They keep moving the goalpost.
Of course. Yeah. And you say, well, I thought you guys were the fast-moving ones. We spent 5 years, you spent 7 years. We did it right, you didn't. And now you're going to spend the next 5 years trying to clean up the mistakes of what you've just pushed out.
Yeah. Well, I think definitely when you look at Ethereum versus Cardano in the networks, I think you're definitely looking at, the idea of let's just throw everything to the wall and see what sticks, and then a slow, methodical roadmap, which, you got a lot of criticism for over the years, but I think people are now seeing like, oh, maybe that's the better way. Maybe you should plan. Maybe you should plan. So, Ethereum versus Cardano, definitely an interesting conversation. I think when we're looking at the roadmap for ETH 2.0 being completely rolled out, we're quite a ways away from that happening. Now they're going to be working on sharding and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how their tumbles and their slow moving, will create some gaps maybe for Cardano to come in and, eat up some of the market share. But layer 1 platforms, this has been my biggest investment ever in crypto, has been in layer 1s. Obviously in Ethereum, obviously in Cardano, Cosmos, Elrond, tons of projects out there, Algorand. But I want to know, when it comes to, I want to get your thoughts on other layer 1 platforms. But first, let's start, can we pause for a moment of silence for Solana? So I've said I think Solana is, that was good. See, I got to laugh. So I think Solana or Cardano is the anti-Solana. I think there are two as different projects as you can see out there. One is, we can pause it, we can do whatever we want. We're going to pump it from the inside. We're going to distribute our coins to a bunch of, venture capital and team members and things like that. You guys took a much different approach. What is your thoughts on Solana today? Do you think it's going to survive just because they, pump money from the inside?
I don't really think much of Solana. I mean, it doesn't come up. There's nothing on the technology side or any of these things. It's like they seem to have been very adept at growing an ecosystem, and maybe it was
an ecosystem without a community. I mean, where are the Solana fanboys?
There's tons of them. I know that because they yell at me on Twitter.
It's like 3 guys with 7 alt accounts.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but Twitter's not really real.
People get slammed on Twitter.
Look,
I didn't know.
They're loved in Silicon Valley, and actually, some people in the Solana ecosystem even gave people in this room money. They certainly have big wallets and big aspirations, and they work really hard, and they've grown an ecosystem, for better or for worse. I pay attention to layer 1s that add something to the conversation. You look at Algorand, they add things to the conversation. Great VRF research, really cool stuff in the BFT space. They're starting to do the post-quantum stuff. It's real technology. Avalanche is real technology. Even Ethereum with the merge is like a blueprint on what not to do. So it adds something to the conversation.
That's good.
Okay, so
burn.
So there's tons of great stuff out there. Small caps like Ergo, big caps like a Bitcoin, and every one of them gives something there. If somebody goes and builds something and makes a lot of value, and it just on off-the-shelf stuff, and they're moving fast and breaking things, all the power to them. And if that community likes using it and that's their thing, all the power to them. There's no competition there because we have so radically different philosophies. Obviously, the applications and use cases that we would pursue as an ecosystem would be different from the ones they pursue. And because the Venn diagrams don't overlap, where are we competing? We're not. So why care? Why have tribalism? Why even worry about it? It doesn't bother me at all. It is a case study on what not to do on network design and these types of things and how not to scale a blockchain. That's great. There's something to learn. And every now and then we have some good fun. Like a joke is not tribalism. It's not reality. It's okay to have the Nintendo cartridge and blow on it and tweet that. Because at the end of the day, does that really materially impact or affect anything? If Solana was working on an interesting thing that happened to overlap on our Venn diagram, and they came to us and said, we'd like to co-author a paper together or do that, sure, why not? It's better for both of us. It works for both of us. We have plenty of blockchain ecosystems that do that publicly are not so nice on Twitter and so forth. So you got to set the social media version of reality apart from the actual version of reality for the projects, and there's probably some good there. And you know, if it ever comes into our orbit, then of course we'd talk about it and have an opinion on it one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. I think when you're talking about what you guys are doing, I mean, I've always thought Cardano is probably the best. You know, it is the best layer 1 platform. I do think Ethereum does have a little bit of a first mover's advantage, a little bit, right? I think right now it's kind of their market share to lose, but I certainly think that if there's one out there, I really don't put anything on probably Cardano's level outside of Ethereum, and just because of the things that I mentioned there. But let's go back to the Cardano ecosystem itself. We've got some DEXs, we've got NFTs there, we have other dApps. Like, what are you excited about when it comes to what's being built on the Cardano network right now?
Well, and there's some really cool out there utility, like the whole Singularity ecosystem that Ben and friends are building. There's World Mobile and what they're building, and it's really hard to argue with like decentralized telecommunication. That's really cool. There's a ton of RealFi projects in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia that are coming, and I think your water's there, that are coming, that are really exciting, and we follow them, collaborate with them. Like Possession just raised 11 million, and that's going to come to our ecosystem pretty soon. Some cool things on wallets that are really making some good headway. Algorithmic stablecoins as well. Jet in particular is looking fun. The sidechains movement is going to bring a lot of bridges and new experiences to Cardano. So it's one of those, now that Vossel's out, just kind of wait and see. And you know, we certainly contribute some, but most people in this room are doing their own thing. The biggest surprise for me was the convergence of metaverse, GameFi, and NFTs on Cardano. I keep saying it because it crept up on us. 6 million issued assets, 40% of all the projects on Cardano are NFT related. It's really cool, and it's super creative, and it's brought a lot of new actors into our space that have no prior blockchain experience, no prior blockchain connection, and they're finding Cardano as their first entry point. Used to be you started with Bitcoin, and that was the gateway drug, and that corrupted you. And then you go into the crypto space, and you're like a crypto alkaline. But now we have people going straight from normal life into crypto life through NFTs into Cardano, which is so cool. That's broadening the tent in a certain respect. So you just got to watch it, and you just got to see how these things evolve and materialize. And there's a lot of things on the partnership side that I think will happen, especially as we talk about standards and certification, bridges, and we talk about multi-coin wallets and dApp certification and these types of things. It's going to bring a lot of transitivity between the ecosystems, especially small cap cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, that's great. We're working on an NFT platform that we'll be rolling out, you know, sometime late this year, next year. Cardano NFTs will be included on that. So we're super excited about that. There's so much value in the Cardano NFT community. I know they just had the conference last weekend. You were there. It's really cool to see, you know, people actually getting behind NFTs that aren't just like trying to buy them for $1 zillion and sell them for 10 cents like Logan Paul did, right? But I want to talk to you about kind of some of the things that we're talking about here. Like, a lot of people consider you to be one of the elder statesmen of crypto. You know, you've been in here since the beginning, and there's a constant battle of trying to stand up for the crypto community, but then and what's right and decentralization and good direction that all this goes. And then also for you personally being vested in Cardano, you know, sometimes that can get a little wonky there because it's hard to draw those lines. Now, recently, you made some comments about the Ripple case, right? And you know, I'm not a tribalist myself. I've got coins I like, I got coins I don't like, but I'm not a maximalist. I don't think it makes sense to be an altcoin maximalist. You know, I think we really want to see the whole crypto ecosystem thrive. But basically, you made some comments about the case, and it's one of these things where you're trying to, as a person who understands things very well, explain with a Ripple case that, no, it's not a security, that's what we should be focusing on, while a lot of the people in the XRP community are focusing on the, you know, as you called it, a grand conspiracy. I think there's a lot of truth to the conspiracies, but I think you've got to look at them as two separate issues. I think certainly SEC needs to be held accountable, but that's down the road. Also, right now, we just need them, you know, need Ripple to win that case. And by the way, if you're in the Cardano community and you're thinking like, oh, you know, I sure do hope that XRP loses, that Ripple loses, that's not the right way to look at it, because any coin out there can be next. If the SEC continues this regulation by enforcement, this is a key point. It doesn't matter if you did anything wrong. It doesn't matter if you did anything wrong. You can do everything right, and they still can come after you. So I just want to get your thoughts on the whole thing that happened this week. I certainly didn't like a lot of people from the XRP community attacking you. I think some of them had good intentions and meant well, but it kind of spiraled out of control. Like, what are your overall thoughts on the Ripple case, the XRP community, and things like that?
Well, Twitter is not reality. It's important to understand that. And it's a closed matter from the perspective that there's nothing to be gained in any further engagement. The biggest frustration point for me was that I mentioned something, and then the people commenting on the thing I mentioned took it and turned it into something else.
That's called meme culture.
And then they broadcasted that, and then people are either agreeing or disagreeing based upon what people interpreted what I said. At the end of the rainbow, let's say you live in the XRP community. What do you want? You want XRP to win its case, unless you're a crazy person. But if you're a real rational person, you want it to win its case. So the primary objective is win the case. My comments, and I said the grand conspiracy is not the issue. Whether it's true or not is not the issue. That's the interpretation of that, but these people don't care to have nuance. The issue here is that all of this attack, the personal attacks, the viciousness of it on particular members of a particular government agency, what they're accomplishing is, first, they're forcing the SEC to dig its heels in and become more vicious in its enforcement, but more importantly, they're muddying the waters and making it more difficult for the industry as a whole to support Ripple. And ultimately, what is the intellectual argument here? The free pass argument. It's like being in a pool drowning and the lifeguard comes in and you say, no, we have to drown together. Because if they didn't get a free
100%.
pass, what would that imply? That Ethereum is also a security. Okay, so I guess they're intellectually honest in enforcement then. But at the end of the day, now both of them are in a bad position instead of just one. Wouldn't you want Ethereum not to be so you can use those arguments in support of you winning? So it just doesn't make any intellectual sense. And now if you want to go and point out corruption, I was part of the Ron Paul movement. And I remember when we had the whole audit the Fed, we got a supermajority of the U.S. House of Representatives to sign off on a one-time GAO audit of the Federal Reserve System. Somewhere along the way, campaign donations started trickling in, and somewhere along the way, the Senate decided they didn't want to go down an audit of the Fed. Literally, the people who print our money are above being audited. Go figure. We apparently don't have a right as Americans to know that the people in charge of our money, what the hell they're doing behind the doors. And it was so incredibly irritating because you'd talk to people and it was almost like invasion of the body snatchers. You'd engage with a congressman or a senator and then they'd be 100% with you and say, well, I thought we already audited them. And we're like, no, you don't. Oh, we should do that. And then a week later, they're like, we can't do it. It would interfere with monetary stability. It's like, what happened to you, Senator Johnson? What happened to you? You know, and so I can understand the frustration of feeling that the U.S. government's out to get you. In some cases, there are certainly nefarious forces that can come and interfere in marketplaces and do things. Obama gets elected. I thought for sure he'd start an inquisition and burn Wall Street to the ground. He had a supermajority in the Senate and Congress. And who's the guy he brought in to help clean it up? Timothy Geithner. It's like he went to the bottom of the swamp creatures. He's like, no, I don't want the surface swamp creatures. I'm looking for some top shelf swamp creature. The guy ran the New York Federal Reserve System. He's part of the problem, and he came in, and that was his response to clean up. No one went to jail in that respect. So I feel the indignity and the outrage when you feel like a regulatory agency is against you. But you have to understand that these are huge organizations. They have tens of thousands of people. The commission has 5 commissioners. They have to vote on things. And there were some facts and circumstances there that for whatever reason they looked at that pissed them off in a certain way. Negotiations had been going on for years. They deteriorated to a point where a Wells notice was submitted. At that juncture, your only goal, if you're a member of that community, is how do we win that case? Which allies do we want to bring in? Do you want to go and say the number 2 cryptocurrency, instead of saying we're in this together, you go and say all the people running it are criminals who bribed the SEC and they should all go to jail? So does that make them want to help you and work with you, or does that make them enemies? Okay, go make them enemies. I guess you're alone. For 5 years, I've supported XRP and said, this whole thing is wrong, don't do it. only time I ever criticized them publicly is when they put Ben Losky on their board,
Right.
the guy who created BitLicense, who destroyed the entire New York City cryptocurrency community for years. I thought it was wrong that they put them on their board, and I publicly stated that. Outside of that, I know David Schwartz, I know Chris Larson, I know Brad Garlinghouse. We had dinner together at the Milken Institute. He was in a leprechaun outfit. It was great. We have a lot of fun. We get along. It's easy for us to get along. Yet somehow, years of being a supporter, years of saying we could collaborate and work together completely evaporate because I just don't want to go down the road of accusing an entire government agency of criminal conduct. I've been down that road with the audit the Fed. I've been down that road for more than 10 years, and I saw how pointless and pyrrhic it can be. It feels certainly good to say the evil government is really corrupt, but at the end of the day, you accomplish nothing. At the end of the day, you don't really get any change. And at the end of the day, if your goal is to win a lawsuit, it doesn't help you at all. It just removes your ability to work with people. It removes your ability to build things, especially bridges and relationships that you do need to have. And even if you do win, everybody hates you. Because, okay, thanks for the win, but you still have all the bad blood now because you just called a whole bunch of people in the Ethereum space criminals who bribe government politicians. Okay. And by the way, you've weaponized the government agency. You made it personal. It's like going to war with the IRS. You can win, but every year they're going to find a way to audit your ass. Yeah. Every year they're just going to grind you into the dust. And it never ends. You stoke these fires. What if Ripple wants to do an IPO and they have to do the S1 filing? Who do they ask for that? What government agency would regulate that? Yeah, exactly. So what do you gain from going down that particular road? So this is about justice. Well, if you want justice, then you're going to have to change the law. Because you're not the first one to have complaints here. Any more so that people had issues with Enron or Bernie Madoff or any of these scandals that we've seen for decades and decades and decades. And I'll tell you, the biggest fucking scandal we have right now is the way the world banking system works.
Absolutely.
And how horrible it is and what they do to people. You got banks with trading desks that are basically running cartels and laundering drug money and all these things. They get away with it every fucking day. So, I understand it's emotional and it's painful and it hurts and these types of things, but my only comments were focus on the thing that's going to win and focus on building bridges and relationships. Because of those comments, thousands and thousands and thousands of tweets, it was trending on Twitter, grand conspiracy. People attacked me, called me a petulant child, unprofessional, and just all these just vitriol and negativeness. I kind of was a little disappointed with David Schwartz and others saying a lot could be said and, well, I'm just going to say it makes me sad. How about you grow a fucking pair of balls and tell your community not to be conspiratorial? Maybe you should do that. Because at the end of the day, we all have to live in this space together. And hedging in the face of this madness doesn't solve anything. You very clearly have to say, we're here to win, and we're looking for allies to help us win because we're all in this together. Not, we're here to win. Oh, by the way, the second largest cryptocurrency bribes people and conducts criminal conspiracies with government agencies. What are you doing, man? Even if you win, you still have to kind of live in this industry. We still go to the same parties. We still do the same things. It's just nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And that's why I said there's nothing further to gain from engaging with it. Because I respect you, I'll answer the question. And maybe, just maybe, somebody listening to this on the XRP side, if you let your blind rage and passion and anger assume for just a moment, understand that we're not exactly the enemies here. We didn't start this. We had nothing to do with this. Every statement that's ever been uttered is, you're not a security, let's fight together for it. I've been going to Washington trying to get legislation passed to help everybody.
Yeah.
Were you guys going and talking to senators and congressmen and engaging with the regulatory arm, the U.S. government, trying to get us in a position where we're better? I'm sorry, we're here working. And just because I don't subscribe to the idea that an entire government agency is owned by a small cryptocurrency relative to BlackRock that has $9 trillion, relative to JP Morgan Chase, relative to everybody else, if these guys are so easily bought and sold, why the hell aren't all cryptocurrencies illegal then? Why haven't they done it? There's $25 trillion just floating around Wall Street. Why didn't they just create BitLicense for all, then for everybody, and just have 5 banks be allowed to control everything if they're so easily bribed for 20 million here or 30 million here or so forth? Think it through, okay? And ask yourself, even if it is true in this particular instance, how does it help you win the case? How does that help you? How does that not distract things? And also, let's say for the sake of the argument that you're wrong. What you're doing is harassing people then. You're accusing people of being criminals who actually aren't. Some of those people get death threats. Some of those people get harassed at conferences. Some of those people, their families get attacked and harassed. So are you so certain in your conspiracy that you're totally cool with that in the consequences of being wrong? If the end result is exactly the same, except for the fact that you've now reduced your chances of winning in that respect. So think that through, and if at the end of this rant you still think I'm being childish, unprofessional, you still think I'm a bad actor, okay. Remember, it's still a decentralized ecosystem. I don't speak on behalf of Cardano. I don't speak on behalf of ADA. Please feel free to go to Twitter and say because I said something that was mean and wrong and evil that you're now selling all your ADA. Okay. Can't stop you, and you've completely missed the entire point of decentralization. This is just one man's opinion who's lived in this space for 8 years, who's been in the policy space longer than that, lost the fight with the Federal Reserve and audit the Fed, and has dealt with every one of these issues top to bottom, and was actually there at Ethereum when we were thinking all of these things. I can assure you, I was there. There's not a lot of grand plan behind the founding of Ethereum. Okay, there wasn't a lot of clever operations behind the founding of Ethereum. They almost ran out of money from the ICO because they didn't hedge the Bitcoin that they raised. They raised it at 650, and they divested a huge amount at 250 because they didn't know how to hedge it. They only had $500,000 left in the bank account when they launched Ethereum out of the 18 million that they raised, okay? So this was not exactly the great Machiavellian cabal that knew how to run the entire government. They hired me, for God's sakes. Come on.
Yeah, what were they thinking?
Yeah, I know, right? What were they thinking? So, you know, we're all in this together, and my advice as a guy who's been here for a long time is just chill out. You know, and just understand that these are human beings. There are real consequences, and this ecosystem lives or dies by how open and welcoming you are. And if somebody backs you for 5 years and you treat him this way after 2 words are uttered that you don't like, what are you advertising to the rest of the cryptocurrency ecosystem about people who build projects there, companies that associate with you, things that are built on top? The minute that someone disagrees with you, they're now the enemy and they have to be removed. We have another ecosystem that does that. It's called Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
And look what the maximalists have done.
Yeah.
I was there before maximalism. It was a great, lovely time.
Absolutely.
And we had a very diverse group of people like Gavin Andresen and Roger Ver and Mike Hearn and all these others. They're all gone. And the people that are left over are like Max Kaiser and Team Orange Ride or Die. And if you dare to do anything that deviates from it, you're not only evil, you're a criminal, and you must be destroyed, you know.
And you must be declared a security.
Exactly, exactly. Jimmy Song does that,
yeah.
you know. So do you want to become that type of community? If not, you really have to take pause to this thing and take a step back and say,
like Solana.
This guy.
Yeah, well, Sam Bankman-Fried's not my favorite. So he's got a bad haircut, too. Can we give it up for Charles' haircut? Great haircut. Much better than Sam Bankman-Fried's.
With what little hair I have left. You know? I was so young when I joined the space. I had hair. I didn't have the belly. You know, I didn't even have gout back then.
Wow, amazing times. So yeah, I think really
Don't do crypto, kids.
What people should take away from this, I think, and the XRP Army should take from this, especially, and anybody else, is, you know, we're all working together on this. You know, we're all working together. You shouldn't want, unless it's an absolute scam like BitConnect, you shouldn't want the SEC being able to sue somebody for some kind of nuance, because that's very dangerous for the entire space. So I think working together and focusing, you know, on what we all need to be focused on, which is moving regulation forward in the space, is important. Now, you know, I know, Charles, I know you've done a lot of work with regulation. We at BitBoy Crypto, we're like behind the scenes doing a lot of stuff as well. And by some of the stuff we were doing, we came across some information about a potential federal bit license. You said bit license for New York City was the worst piece of crypto regulation ever, forced people out. There are some bad actors out there that are trying to push a federal bit license in order to make it where there's nothing decentralized that will be legal, because the decentralized exchange like the ones on Cardano ecosystem, they can't get one of these licenses. That's one plan that's coming up. Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX, he's behind that 100%. And so I've spoken out a lot about that stuff. But the fact is, even though that's a really, really bad plan, we do need some plan in crypto. And so in your trips to Washington, D.C., and your talks with senators and politicians, like, what do you think? I know we're kind of running out of time here. I know it's a big question to ask here at the end. But what is the current state of regulation when it comes to crypto? And what do you think is kind of the light at the end of the tunnel we can move towards something positive?
So Washington, D.C., it's cyclic. And what happens is that there are times when the gates are closed and there are times when the gates are open. In a politically divisive midterm year, the gates are closed. You can't pass major legislation because there's just, unless like a war happens or something, and even then people are divisive. So this year was not the year to do legislation, actually sign a bill, unless everybody's pushing hard and a president is putting his entire political fortunes on the line. And even then it's 50-50 and it's very controversial. But this is the year to talk about it. And that's what happened with the Financial Innovation Act, the STAB Now bill. There's the Digital Commodities Exchange Act, the Biden Executive Order, MiCA in Europe. Everybody's doing stuff. Everybody's talking about stuff. So the midterms, the way it looks right now, there's very high probability that the Republicans are going to retake the House of Representatives, the Senate, who the hell knows. It's one Fetterman away. We'll see where that falls. But in any event, it's divided government instead of unified government, and that means things have to be bipartisan or else they cannot be pushed through. Both the Republicans and the Democrats agree that regulation needs to happen. Where they disagree is on wedge issues that are probably not material to a lot of the things the layer ones worry about, except for the proof of work space. For example, environmentalism, the introduction of the Department of Energy and the EPA into the mining process as recommended by the White House report. So more likely than not, we'll see a strengthening of the CFTC, more resources going their way, and specific powers for them to deal with cryptocurrencies. What remains to be seen is, will they tinker with the definition of whether something is a security or a commodity? So in other words, will the Howey test be modernized in a little bit to accommodate the fact that facts and circumstances change? The people who created the Securities Exchange Act of 1933 and the Supreme Court that was responsible for interpreting it in the 40s for the Howey test couldn't imagine this idea that a digital asset could jump from one bucket to the other. They're paper. They're issued by companies. It's inconceivable. You'd have to know about the internet, and you'd have to know about digital tokens and these things. It's nuts to say that they would have conceived of that. But their argument was, well, legislatures will legislate. They'll just create new legislation to update and modernize the bill. They didn't learn about the bipartisan way we do things in 2022. And so the problem is the legislative branch just hasn't done its job. The good news is I think they will do something. The jury is out on whether they will go reach deep enough in to help update and modernize Howey a little bit to give a bit more regulatory clarity. I do not believe that regulation through enforcement is reasonable or prudent. You're one bad commissioner away, one bad chairman away, to basically an endless debate that costs $100 million every time the clock ticks to get some semblance of clarity, and people can always disagree. And don't give me some bullshit that courts will create precedent. Roe v. Wade was supposed to be the law of the land. Every lawyer goes to law school, oh, that's an example of stare decisis, and then suddenly it's gone. Shit changes all the time, and courts are not beholden to the whims and wills or consequences of the day-to-day affairs. This is the point of the legislative branch. They put things in stone until otherwise. So it's very important that the branch does its job. So what we've been doing is engaging with people on both sides of the aisle and trying to get an understanding of where their mindset's at and have real discussions about things like consumer protections, disclosures, real discussions about what is decentralization and how do you measure it? How does that ball jump from one bucket to another bucket and back, and how do you create an agile regulatory system, as well as teaching them what other jurisdictions are doing. What is Switzerland doing with FINMA? What is the JFSA doing in Japan? What is Dubai doing with its complete regulatory overhaul? What is Europe doing with MiCA and so forth? That give them the knowledge and foresight that they need to try to balance out something that doesn't destroy the crypto industry and allows the industry to continue growing and is manageable. Now, we have to be intellectually honest. This is the industry that gave us Luna and BitConnect and OneCoin and these other things. So there are certainly fraud and scams and these other things. The reality is the vast majority of those can actually be prosecuted without any additional regulation. Fraud is fraud. Corruption is corruption. Insider trading is insider trading. Market manipulation is market manipulation. You don't need new law to say it's extra special evil. It's kind of like when you charge somebody who's murdered somebody with a hate crime. It's like, well, they're already going to jail for life. I was like, why do we need to like extra super murder or something like that? It's like, okay, you can do it, but it doesn't materially change the outcome. So you don't need special legislation in that particular sense. You need special legislation when you're talking about new assets, new taxonomy, and this idea of assets that can become one thing and then another thing and so forth. And also, you have to leave carve-outs so that existing technology doesn't get banned. There's a very real possibility, if the legislation goes in the wrong direction, that DEXs and algorithmic stablecoins could be banned. There's a very real possibility that we may inadvertently have disclosure requirements that make stake pools illegal. There's a very real possibility that all of DeFi may get captured and forced to have licenses to operate, which obviously it can't, because who the hell would apply for it and be able to comply with it, even if they could apply for it? So TradFi's last death throes are certainly reaching out of the swamp and trying to drag DeFi in. And it's very important that we use this moment with some wisdom. The good news is that so far, engaging with people on the right and the left, they don't want to do harm. At least the reasonable ones. Not all of them. Some are crazy, but we always have had crazy people, let's be honest.
The crazy ones are the small percentage.
For the most part. They're like the also here votes. But that's okay. You know, you don't need all the votes. You just need a majority. And there's well more than enough that I think after the midterms, the dust will settle and something is going to get passed in 2023. And we're all trying to work together to get something passed that gives people the certainty that they need so that the layer ones can continue growing, people can launch new layer ones, people can continue to innovate, and dApp developers don't get regulated out of existence.
Yeah, I think all that's really great. And I think for the audience, I think for you guys to take away from this, Charles is fighting for this regulation to go a positive way. I'm fighting for this to go a positive way. But we're just, some people, right? We need more people fighting, more people looking at, calling your congressman, calling your senator, whatever it is. Like, people always say, I went over to Dubai, and like, how do you live in America? Like, how things are so crazy over there with crypto and this and that. And well, you know what? My kids play baseball here. My kids go to school here. I don't want to leave America. I'm not going to. So we got to stay here, and we got to fight, and we got to make it better. Especially, I'm a one-issue voter in crypto. If you are for crypto, I'm for you. If you're against crypto in politics, then I'm against you. But we're a little bit of overtime here. Great job answering all the questions. I think people have been, very attentive to what you've been saying. This conference, obviously, Rare Bloom. Everybody give it up for Rare Bloom real quick. Yeah. They put something together really great here. Looking forward to doing it again in the future. But this is your community, Charles. Like, these are your people. Just the last thing I want to just get you to do here is, if you had one message for your community that's here, what would that be?
Just one? I'm a man of many words.
You? I can't relate.
I just have fun. You only get to live once, and this is your life, and you choose to be here. No one forced you to, so enjoy what you do. Be positive, don't be cynical, and just love life, and make friends. And it can be something as simple as when you want to take a picture with somebody, don't use your own camera, use their camera. Why? Because then you have to get their number, and they have to message you. That means you've just made a new friend. So this is a human endeavor, and the point of crypto is to bring people together, not divide people. And also try to understand where other people are coming from. Every fight I've ever had in this industry is usually the root cause of it is that we're talking past each other. Right now in the politics in Washington, people are talking past each other. You look at what's going on, and we're saying, don't destroy our industry. And the politicians saying, well, I just watched $3 trillion turn to $1 trillion, and the people who are responsible for that, they kept all the money and ran away, and that money came from poor people. That's not okay. I don't think anybody disagrees with these facts, but yet because they're talking past each other, we're not able to have a meeting of the minds of how do we solve the underlying problem. It's the same for the tribalism in the ecosystem. It's the same for just basic things like measuring decentralization. So taking a moment to take a deep breath, have some empathy, and see where people are coming from, and to quote Bill Clinton, I feel your pain, you know, and to have that moment where you feel someone's pain, you connect with somebody, you know, I think that's probably the way to approach it. And if you can take that and embed that in some small way into your life, not only is your professional career going to be better, but you'll have a happier marriage, you'll have a happier life, better children, everything will get better, right? If people just want to be heard, seen, and understood.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a bear market, I think people definitely need that message. You know, have fun with it. This is so fun. We get to do this. I mean, there's a reason why, like, all my best friends, except for one, are all in crypto. We all kind of come from the same spot. We think the same way. We think the cutting edge of technology, cutting edge of finance. And we all just understand that our system is broken. You know, our system here in the United States, across the world, it's broken. It's got to be fixed. I think Cardano is, you know, one of those solutions is going to play a role. So, Charles, thank you so much for joining me up here. And, yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.